Hello, Howard.
Good afternoon, Sean.
Or good evening, or good morning. I guess it depends on what time somebody's listening to this.
Yeah, but it's afternoon to you and I.
It is. It is afternoon here in beautiful 918 Tulsa, Oklahoma, for another episode of Coptales. And
Cocktails.
man, we have got an interesting story today.
All right. We always have interesting
We do.
stories.
Week in and week out, we're able to do that. But I want you to imagine that you are a police officer.
Yeah, I'd have to lose. Well, I was going to say a few IQ points, but it'd probably be
No, I say you have to imagine. That's the only thing you
I
can
know.
do.
Listen. I'm a nurse. It's hard to be a nurse.
You're going to imagine being a police officer.
Right. So I'm gonna imagine that. Okay, so I've got it in my head.
Having the pleasure and the cojones of wearing that badge, but you did something heroic.
Okay.
And so you received a Medal of Valor.
Okay.
It's a rarity in this profession. It's a rarity in the military to get something like that. There are a lot of different commendations, but like the Medal of Valor, I mean, that is one that is up there that they just generally do not give out. But when you receive this medal, you are actually in jail at the time.
Okay, so how do you get the Medal of Valor and you're in jail at the same time if you're a police officer?
Well, I am going to let our guest today,
all right,
Jeff Henderson, tell that story. But before we bring him in,
we're going to have a drink.
We're going to have a drink.
We always going to have a drink.
Got to have a drink. Now, I'm going to tell you a really quick story. So Jeff and I worked together here on the Tulsa Police Department. From the time I came on, he had about 2 years on more than I did. And he was a running and gunning kind of guy. And so I kind of jumped in with that group of officers and quickly adapted, learned from these guys and so forth. But Jeff is he's not a large man.
No,
he is was a proficient. I wouldn't even say proficient. He was a highly motivated police officer that put violent people in prison to make Tulsa safer. But Jeff was also a wrestler growing up.
All right. You don't have them cauliflower ears?
He didn't have the cauliflower ears.
You don't mess with those people with cauliflower ears.
It might have helped his appearance if he did have them. But
he's got headphones on, so that's why I had to ask.
Yeah. No, but Jeff's father was a career cop here in Tulsa. So he kind of came on the department with, a lot of cops already knowing him, seeing him grow up and so forth. But Jeff didn't like to take shit. And it didn't matter if it was from his buddies, his fellow officers, guys that we all played sports together, or when bad guys like to run their mouth on the streets. So he quickly developed a name amongst us. We started calling him, let's put it this way. You've seen Foghorn Leghorn.
Oh, yeah, Foghorn Leghorn. That was a cartoon when we were kids. Back when you get up on Saturday morning and watch cartoons. Foghorn was a big chicken. Big chicken,
back when cartoons were good. But he had a little buddy.
Yeah, that little buddy was a chicken hawk.
He was a chicken hawk.
And that chicken hawk was about ankle high to this big rooster named Foghorn Leghorn, right?
But did he back down from anybody?
Oh, no. He was going to eat him some chicken.
So that was Jeff's nickname on the police department. We called him Chicken Hawk or Hawk for that very reason. So he was always like, where are they at? Where are they at? Let's get them. Let's go. That type of deal. So in honoring Jeff Chicken Hawk Henderson, made a little trip out to
I think I got that at Park
Hill Liquors here in Tulsa. And we've got a bottle that does not have much left in it of chicken cock.
You know why it doesn't have much in it? Because we drank that. Because we like that. Because it has no flavorings of apple and or peach in it.
Like some of the other choices our guests have brought
we
to
actually
this show.
Like this. This tastes like corn and oak barrels, which is probably one of the finest things you could put in your mouth.
That is true.
Yeah, it is one of the
this
best
is this is kind of a family show, so yes, that is true.
It's a fantastic thing. I mean, I like it. And we're gonna have it today.
Well, we don't have a whole lot of it, so let's do our cheers here with the little that we do have. So here's to another episode of Coptales and Cocktails
with Mr. Chicken Hawk Henderson. Woo! Welcome today, sir.
Hey,
Glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so he talked about you got some medals and you got some jail. So today we're going to talk about all that, right?
I hope so. Yeah.
So something tragically went wrong that you're getting a Medal of Valor and you're actually in jail at the same time.
Yeah.
So Let's start with this. How'd you get into policing?
So like Sean said, my dad was a Tulsa police officer. I watched that growing up, hung out with those older guys, that generation, and learned some from them, listened to their stories, and knew at an early age that's what I was going to do. School was not the greatest thing for me. I got by with an average grade, and I really didn't worry about it because I really knew where I was going. So, I learned from them and was anxious. I graduated from college at 21 and got on the police department. I'd worked at the sheriff's office here in Tulsa for a little while before and worked in the county jail and learned a little bit in there too. That really is somewhere everybody should go if they're going to go into law enforcement. Learn a little bit about what it's about, guys that are in custody and the talk, the lingo, the language before you go on the street. I think it's a great thing to do. But yeah, the Tulsa Police Department turned out to be my career.
So you were a police officer a couple of years before this little whippersnapper came, huh? And I've seen picture of him in his green policing uniforms, because Tulsa police used to have green uniforms, right?
And I had brown hair. I had brown hair back when we had green uniforms.
Yeah, you had hair. So what was it like when you first met Sean? What did you think of this guy, other than he was tall and he had the very
Sean, he was good. Sean was a good policeman. He one of the best I've worked around, and that's the truth. And there was a handful of guys that I worked with in this department that were, what he called motivators, self-initiators, guys that went out there and took care of business. We didn't mess around with tickets and the misdemeanor petty stuff. Yeah, we would talk to everybody, but you always want you want to go up the ladder and try to get the big fish off the street before bigger things happen. And Sean was good. I saw him at an early age. I don't know how old he was, 23, maybe 24, but yeah, tall, skinny. He's finally filled out a little to where he looks normal.
Puberty hit me late. Puberty hit me like when I was about 35 is when I filled out.
Dropped,
yeah. I started getting hair and funny spots on my body and everything. So
what is going on? All right. So you met Sean and he did Sean immediately get to run with you guys, or did it take him a while to kind of get to, because you were kind of in a special unit, weren't you?
Well, we were all in patrol on the north side of town back in those days. That's where we all kind of broke in. The guys that, when I grew up or came on, or what I had learned upon was that, if you want to be a policeman, you're going to work out north. In my opinion, I think 1 year on the north side, at least during this time frame, I think that's equivalent to about 3 years of police work on any other side of town. You learn faster, quicker. It's busy every night. You see shootings about every week, if not every other night. You deal with guns, gangs, and the violence, everything you would think. That's what law enforcement's about, and that's what we did every night. There was vehicle pursuits and car chases and foot pursuits. That was every night back in those days, and you learn a lot. I mean, I was punked, early on as a young officer, rookie. I mean, I made plenty of mistakes. But that makes you better.
Well, you were talking about car chases. I understand you had a pretty good car chase one time, didn't you?
I've had a bunch. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Well, there's one in particular.
Yeah, we're talking about that one in particular. You were going fast.
I guess I can say that now, huh? Yeah, I was going fast. Yeah, I was chasing a car that it had some shooters in it, shooting suspects. They had a lot of guns in the car, and nobody was with me yet. It was an early on pursuit, and we were going in a city streets, but it was under construction. It was gravel and dirt, which probably most people watching this that aren't from here probably think that's Oklahoma, but they were redoing the street. But the car I chased crashed on the other side of the street, and to avoid them, because I didn't want to hurt bad guys, and so I missed their car, went between a gas meter and an electric pole, and drove off a cliff, flipped it upside down. So yeah, I landed in a creek. It looked like something out of Dukes of Hazzard, and I thought at that point in my career I was going to get fired. Little did I know that it would be a long time from then. But yeah, upside down in this creek. These guys running past me and they're laughing, and I can hear their footsteps as through the water as I'm trying to kick the window out to get out. We wound up catching, I think, one of those guys of the three, a whole bunch of guns in the car. So yeah, I crashed my black and white car and my green uniform back in those days. And one guy went to jail. We got a bunch of guns. So it was still fun.
It was worth it, huh?
Well, and you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
it was well documented. There were pictures of this for years. I think it was on the media, in the media.
Oh, of course. Yeah. The Tulsa
Uh,
World's got to put something in there about if any policeman, doesn't do something perfect.
Yeah. So it was good for laughs for sure. Jeff provided lots of laughs throughout the years. He's a funny guy.
Hey, I want to know how you got your nickname, really. I mean, I've heard a little bit about you. You're kind of synonymous in the copping area. So
That story kind of evolved. Sean would be able to tell this. He was in a lot of squads with me. We were all in specialty units, and to be honest, I think it's a dying breed where guys, you got to think outside the box, catch a bad guy. And that doesn't mean driving in a police car up and down the main road. You got to get out there on foot. And, sometimes you got to get creative. And so I couldn't catch these guys back in the day. They were selling dope on the curb. And this was in the early mid-90s when we weren't checking buttholes and guys weren't hiding it, in cups. You just thought they had it on them like a bad guy would. And
I got to interrupt you here. I'm a nurse. We do check buttholes. That's kind of our job sometimes.
Are you checking it for dope?
No.
Okay.
No. We
you
give
gotta
people
reach way
dope.
up there, Howard.
Yeah. You guys are
that
usually.
oil.
No, I mean, we take skin very serious. So every shift we roll people over and we give them a good look and to make sure they're not having any skin breakdown. And we have to, that's part of our job. So that's why I left.
Well, part of our job is also checking the rectum or the personal locker or what do they call it? The personal wallet. What other names are there for it, Jeff? I mean,
Prison pocket.
Yeah, you name it, man. That's part of our job is checking. It'd be interesting to know who's touched more butts and other male genitalia between yourself and me. You as a nurse and me as a cop. I bet we both got pretty high numbers.
This is my penis hand. I've touched a lot of them.
Yeah, well,
18 years of nursing.
This is mine. Let's join.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Thank you. For our listeners outside, we just united our penis count
and shook hands. So we multiplied it. We squared it.
Yes.
Okay.
We should probably edit that, shouldn't we?
No, all good. All right. So you're out there. Some guys are selling dope on a corner.
Yeah. So to catch them, I'd been by there many times, could never jam them up. So one day in uniform, I parked my car a few blocks over, got out, walked through a field, some yards, and climbed up in a tree. And in uniform, it's summertime, this time of year, it's hot in Oklahoma, and 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And these guys are out there grinding and laughing and getting by with it. So I kind of got to see where they were putting the dope, hiding it in the trash on the ground, sitting in this vacant field. So I came on the radio, asked for a couple of cars to pull up and just hook them up and, pat them down, secure them, because I didn't want to give up my position. And the chief of police at that time was actually on a ride along with Luke Sherman and a guy we worked for. And Luke was an active officer out there. So they pulled up and they hooked these guys up, put them in handcuffs. And of course they're playing their game. Why are we in handcuffs? We don't have anything but money and, no dope. And about that time, Luke kind of pointed back there in this field and said, "Hey, look at that tree." And I'm climbing out of this tree, and these dudes are, man, they're beat. They're not happy, and they made a comment, what the fuck, man? It looks like a hawk. And so it kind of evolved, and chicken hawk kind of got added to that from that foghorn leghorn story.
I say, boy,
yeah,
that's hilarious, man. Hey,
I mean,
that's hustling to get the bad guys.
You had to. You want to catch them. I mean, you gotta play the game. And despite what everything is said in this country, man, there's a lot of good policemen out there doing their job. And back in those days, we had fun, and we caught a lot of bad guys.
We did, man. There was another incident, and I'll brag here for Jeff. We had a public housing complex that we had it's basically one way in and one way out of the complex. So as soon as you pull in your police car, everybody knows you're there. I mean, they've got lookouts, they're passing it on. You see everybody dip off, dip off into the breezeways. They're walking away. You're not going to be able to just roll up and make contact with these guys. And unfortunately, these complexes is where we have a huge problem with violent crime, with dope sales and things like that. And so these guys out at this complex called Morning Star, they would be back on the back basketball court, which was in the back part of it. So you could just never roll in and get to them. They saw you. And so Jeff one time literally wrapped himself up or got a big black, like Glad trash bag, leaf bag, like a big leaf bag, put his body in it. And I swear it's a field that rolls up to this fence line. And it was like in the dusk, he laid in this thing off of the street behind it, which luckily didn't have many houses, and slowly rolled his way in this leaf bag all the way up to the fence line. And he is there with his police radio at the fence line, talking to us on the radio, telling us, which guys are selling dope, where it's kept at, where the gun is at that's laying out there, that type of stuff. So then we can roll in and snag them.
That's some sniper stuff right there, man.
We were good, Howard. Again, you got to think outside the box, get creative out there. The street's not going to, just give it to you.
Yeah, they don't give it to you free. You got to earn it.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So let's kind of move on to the bad part of policing, when you got kind of involved with agent that kind of hung you out to dry.
Yeah. So later in my career, I was in the gang unit, worked there for many years. Sean became my sergeant later into that as well. So where we were assigned, we targeted violent crimes, and there was a federal agent who was assigned to that unit, which was not abnormal. We had a lot of different federal agencies that assisted or helped or indicted folks based on our arrest and our reports. Well, he was an ATF agent. Brandon McFadden was his name at that time. And he wasn't from Tulsa, didn't really know him well when I first met him. Got to know him a little bit as a coworker and didn't have any problems with him, but he rode kind of in the back seat of our car. And when we stopped cars or made arrests or ran search warrants, if it was worthy of a federal indictment, guns and dope, he took those elements and had those folks sent to federal prison based on the indictment and the reports. To speed this up, Brandon worked with us to a point, and then kind of disappeared. Went back to, he was from Lubbock, Texas. But during this time frame, we had ran a search warrant, and Sean has probably said this. I know you guys have had some informants on here and folks talking, but we had a lot of informants. We flipped a lot of people in North Tulsa, East Tulsa. I mean, there were snitches everywhere, and they provided information to us, which made us successful, and we looked good, and it was a win-win. So McFadden had taken a couple of my informants, people I had just didn't have time for or couldn't really control all the time because we had a lot of them. And so he was helping with that. Problem is he became too engaged with one informant in particular that he apparently started selling drugs with, doing crimes with. Unbeknown was disappearing from our office and telling his office he was with us, but he wasn't. And as this went on for a while, I guess he finally got out of Tulsa, probably thinking he was not going to get caught. And so that didn't work out for him. He got indicted. The informant actually wrote statements, testified, gave grand jury testimony that he sold drugs with Brandon McFadden. They split money, and so he was indicted. And when he came to Tulsa to plead guilty, I think he was looking at 40 years. And as you probably know, even as a nurse, there's plea deals, and if you want to try to help yourself, get some leniency. 40 years is a long time in prison. You got to tell something on someone. And if it's worthy and they listen to you, they may buy into it and you help yourself out. So his testimony was that, yes, he was a corrupt federal agent, and everything he had learned while in Tulsa, he learned from me and named a few other Tulsa police officers, said I was the kingpin that taught him how to conduct this business. And so ultimately, a really long story, I was federally indicted on a 62 count indictment that man, you name it. It was from kidnapping to trafficking firearms, cocaine, marijuana, methamphetamine, witness tampering, 20 or some odd counts of perjury, you name it. It was everything, minus homicide. It was well covered. Problem was it wasn't well investigated, and they didn't do anything to corroborate any of the stories that were said. McFadden changed his stories about 6 weeks after he was first arrested because he had made the mistake of, yeah, he made me look dirty, but he had to make a lot of other people look dirty to make this kind of work. And he hadn't said that in the first part of his stories. So that's when he named other officers that worked at the division I was at within the gang unit. So my partner and I at that time was Bill Yelton, great policeman. I learned from Bill. I looked up, to Bill. He was a, policeman of the year here in the city of Tulsa. The guy was a policeman.
He was a legend on this department.
He was.
He really was.
Yeah. And so Bill also took a fall with me. We sat in jail for right at a year. They detained us. They said we were threats to society. The prosecutor said that, to the judge, they couldn't let us out because we would be maybe a flight risk or a threat to the community. So they detained us in jail, put us in solitary confinement for that entire year while we waited on trial. We weren't allowed outside, none of the, if I'll call it perks you get in jail, but a lot of guys in there were, at least getting a day in the sunlight, an hour to, work out, feel the sun. That couldn't work with us because of who we were, and people we arrested were in the jail, with us. So understandably, we were locked down.
Well, I have a question for you. So the evidence, 62 counts, right? You said 62 counts.
Yeah.
You have to have some pretty strong evidence in order to get somebody indicted on 62 counts. What was this evidence they had?
So that's one thing I'll tell you, in my opinion, the grand jury system in this country is probably the most unconstitutional thing still left in the criminal justice system. There's a saying, you can indict a ham sandwich. That's been said by, prosecutors I've known in the past, judges, friends, lawyers, and it's true. If you want to tell a bunch of stories about one individual, you've got a prosecutor that goes in a room with, 15 to 25 people, and that prosecutor, whether it's, he or she, presents his case to this grand jury, these people, common citizens, and he or she's in charge of those questions. He or she may have known that, Howard, Sean, you guys were in Hawaii, but we're going to try to indict you for this bank robbery or this kidnapping that this guy said happened to him. But not saying anything about the fact that they know you were in Hawaii with this airplane ticket. But we're just going to say, we're going to ask these questions to these witnesses and tweak it as much as they need to simply get an indictment. Once the indictment's there, it's on that person, the defendant, me, or whoever it is, to go to trial, or you take a plea deal. That's the federal options you have. And to answer your question, one would think you'd have to have some evidence. Where we came from, street level stuff that we did, these investigations, they involved physical evidence, dope on the table, guns, pictures, photos, witness testimony who really had personal experience, not hearsay, but real evidence. And that wasn't like this in this case. This was a lot of stories that most were fabricated and just made up. The ones that had some truth to it didn't match another person or another witness's stories. Nothing made sense of it. It was truly a circus. And I've never seen anything like that. And I've testified in trial. I was a federal, government expert witness, state witness. I was an expert qualified in both those courts. And I've never in all the trials, hundreds of trials, and if not thousands of hearings, seen anything like what was presented for the case of, with Bill and I's indictment.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here. And so, just like Jeff's talking about for our listeners out there, or even for Howard, who may not know that the grand jury, particularly the federal grand jury, it's just that. I mean, just like he was saying, the prosecutors or whoever the government officials are, in this case, it was the FBI that did the investigation. They get to bring their witnesses through, or their quote unquote victims, and tell a story that, there's nobody else there to defend these stories. There's no defense attorney. The accused is not there to even hear what's going on. And so when Jeff and Bill were arrested on July 20th of 2010, they had no idea what the charges were until they had their what's called a detention hearing the next day. And that's where you start hearing these allegations that are coming out. And even the allegations themselves are not in full detail. At the detention hearing, it's an FBI agent that's up there saying, just as Jeff mentioned, this is why these guys are quote unquote dangerous or a flight risk and should not be released. And what's crazy about it, seeing what these guys went through, was we've arrested so many people for robberies, shootings, convicted felons doing robberies and shootings, and they still get released. They still get bail options. They still get bonds and things like that. And as Jeff mentioned, he and Bill had to sit down there in jail in isolation for, I think it was like 15 months until they went to trial. I just released a book that actually talks about falsely accused police officers. I specifically talk about, just from my perspective, Jeff has a story for himself that, I hope he's able to get out there someday, whether it be a book or a documentary or hell, a TV show, movie, I don't know, something like that. And I talk about, this investigation that went on here in Tulsa, and I talk about Jeff's deal, as well as other cops across the country that have kind of dealt with similar fates.
Well, what I'm hearing here is, and kind of let me summarize this. Chicken Hawk got bound up by a guy who got caught dirty.
Correct.
That guy came to him and said, he goes, "Oh yeah, I got caught, but I learned all this from so-and-so."
That is part of it.
And then a bunch of other people that were probably jammed up as well made statements like, "Oh yeah, I did this stuff too."
Well,
but none of those statements matched up.
Correct.
And so he ends up getting indicted on all these things. How many charges did they actually convict you on, sir?
Well, I was convicted of perjury. The same testimony from the same court case. I think, don't quote me on this, I should know, sadly, but it's been 11 years. Now, there were 3 perjury counts, maybe 4, and then a misdemeanor of a civil rights violation on an individual that we had ran a search warrant on, found guns, dope, money, and he actually pled guilty and went to prison. That was a civil rights violation because the government used an FBI agent to testify that they didn't believe we really were out there doing surveillance to obtain this warrant based on some phone records my phone pinged off of in 2009 of the second closest cell tower, versus if we were really there, it should have pinged off the first closest cell tower. That's what I was convicted of, was the opinionated answer of an FBI agent on my phone records that didn't, in his opinion, line up that he thought we were really out there.
And the perjury, if I'm correct, Jeff, and you can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't like 3 or 4 different cases that you quote unquote purged yourself on. It was different questions on the same case you were asked.
Yeah, the prosecutor, she hated our guts, hated me. I don't know to this day why. She was, I'm sure trying to be a federal judge. She's been long before this, she resigned after this case. But yes, every time I spoke in this hearing in 2009, she rang me up for a perjury charge. It was the same testimony, but every count was every time I spoke. Kind of like, you arrest somebody for DUI and you're going to ring them up for every traffic charge on the way to jail that they ran the stop sign, they were speeding, and no, it just all encompasses DUI. That's what really involved. But
so out of 62 counts, you got charged with 3 or 4.
No, he was charged. He was convicted. Yeah. I think you went to trial on like 58. They dropped a few of them between the initial
one during a hearing. Just for instance, one of the kidnapping cases, the counts of kidnapping a guy, involved Sean, this knucklehead back in '05, said that we had kidnapped him. And he remembered it vividly. He told the story. He cried while he was in the grand jury. I'm reading his testimony, almost to a Steven Spielberg,
Fiction novel.
Yeah, I believed it. At one point, I'm like, holy shit, did I forget we kidnapped this guy? So, in trial, he got up there. He's in an orange jumpsuit. He's in prison. Most of these witnesses were called from prison to say, yeah, Jay, Jeff Henderson did me wrong. But none of them ever said anything about, planting drugs, doing anything. They just were trying to get out of prison by saying, yeah, we heard this, we heard that. But this guy was actually in state custody, in state prison, when he said Sean and I kidnapped him. But nobody did it. No investigation.
Usually kidnap people out of prison? Because
Yeah,
you would have a
not.
pretty good business. People like getting out of prison.
El Chapo, right?
Yeah.
Well, and here's the thing is, and I'll just follow up on Jeff. And this incident is one of the ones I go into detail in the new book, Breaking Blue: Real Life Stories of Cops Falsely Accused. But we hit on that. This guy makes this allegation in either 2009 or 2010. So the investigation's going on in Tulsa. Everybody knows about it. All the cops know about it. Everybody on the streets knows about it. I mean, it's just we hear or heard, who the FBI was talking to on the streets, who they were visiting down the prison system. Guys were being told, hey, if you've got information on dirty cops, we can get your case dismissed. We can get your prison sentence reduced. And I'll give you an example. There was a guy who was serving a LWOP, a life without parole charge, for a drug case that literally Jeff, me, anybody involved in this investigation had never met him. We've never been on a search warrant with him. We've never arrested him, never had contact with him. But the FBI approached him and said, because his girlfriend was a former informant. And so they said, man, if you've got information on Jeff Henderson or any other cops, we can help you get your case. And lo and behold, he got out of prison.
Released from a life without parole sentence. He never met me, but he said, hey, I'll tell you a story about him.
Well, and I'll say this, when we've only got maybe 15, 16 minutes left that we can do the show, but this guy does, just like we said, life without parole, comes up with a story, gets released from prison. By the way, the allegation he made, Jeff was not convicted on. So this guy makes a story, gets out of jail, which there were numerous people that did this. And he has since been arrested by my gang unit again on another search warrant.
This is what we like to refer to in healthcare as bullshit.
Yeah, literally lots of bullshit.
This is bullshit.
But the guy he's talking about that was kidnapped. And I'm sorry, I get fired up. I'll be honest.
I lived it.
I know. And like I said, Jeff ended up spending time in prison. I can't even imagine what that was like. I did go see him down in jail and things like that. But this guy that makes the kidnapping allegation, he makes it up, like I said, 2009 or 2010, when he's facing federal charges for possession of narcotics with intent and possession of a firearm by a felon. And guess what? They dropped all those charges against him. He never went to prison for it. He was caught in a car stop, and then they ran a search warrant at his house where they found these things. But because he made an allegation that he said happened 4 or 5 years earlier that he never told a single person about ever until he's facing federal charges.
Yeah, it sounds like they just really had they were gunning to get some cops, and they let a bunch of bad guys go because of it, which that's horrible,
man. And Jeff and I have talked about this through years. I think it would be great if there was, whether it was a documentary or a local news person here in Tulsa that looked at all the people that had charges dropped against them or were released from prison. I mean, it's a large number that have acquired other cases since then. I mean, the number of guys that have been involved in homicides, I know of, involved in shootings, several of them themselves have been victims of shootings or homicides because of the lifestyle they live.
Yeah, but that's ridiculous.
A lot of prosecutors dropped the ball. No one believed anything. They hadn't even heard from us, and they're cutting these guys, sentences in half or releasing them. Never heard any evidence. So yes, ultimately I went to prison.
Let's talk about that, man. What's that like? I mean, obviously nobody is a fan of going to prison. There's very few people that Jeff or I or any other cop out there that's dealt with. There's some guys, they function well in prison. Let's be honest. There's some guys that's just what is it? 3 meals, what they say? 3 hots and a cot. There you go. There are some that do thrive in there. That is a world that they are comfortable with.
They know. Yeah.
But obviously, the majority of anybody on this planet doesn't want to end up there, let alone a police officer. So let's talk about that a little bit, man. What was that? What was that like first time you kind of touched down there in the yard?
Yeah. So, the most difficult thing is going to be, anybody, I don't care how hard you think you are, but if you really care about your family, kids, wife, spouse, whoever it might be, being gone from them, that's the toughest part. Not having your freedom, not being able to pick the phone up, hug somebody, go out there. Yeah, that's the hard part. Being there. So yeah, I flew on this Conair jet, if you will. It is kind of what you would probably think. You're all shackled up and a bunch of U.S. Marshals. You stand out on a tarmac as they load more prisoners. I landed in South Dakota. Never been there, never will go back. It was cold. I got there in December. Worked for 12 cents an hour shoveling snow for the first 6 months till I got a better job mopping floors for like 19 cents an hour. And it was indoors, but
That's called a pay raise.
yeah, it was.
Well, I mean, shoveling snow in South Dakota, you never run out of work.
No, it's $20 a month. But you got to have that money and to buy things while you're there, food. I had a pair of pleather boots, steel toe boots, and I didn't know what to expect. I got to Oklahoma City, we're the biggest hub in the country for federal inmates. Everybody convicted in federal court goes to Oklahoma City, or at least the majority, and then they're just dispersed to different prisons from that location. That was the first time out of a jail cell where I walked into a pod with a bunch of inmates and praying that none of them recognized me or knew me. It was still on the news down there when I got there. So I'm walking through here and you got a bunch of, knuckleheads, 18th Street looking gangsters and people from all over the country. And it is intimidating. Again, yeah, I'm stupid. I've been in a bunch of fights, but I'm not going to fight five guys. Nobody's going to win anything when you're trying to be tough. So I laid low and just tried to, bid my time and get home. But it's different when you get there. Those guys are, everybody's kind of wanting to know what you're there for, who you are. They're nosy. They have nothing else to do but learn about you because they already know about themselves. So when I did get to South Dakota, I'm out there on the track walking around one day. They had a little 1/4 mile track and a couple of guys approached me within literally the first 12 hours. They knew who I was, where I was from. Hey, you're that
Oh,
policeman from
shit.
Tulsa. And I really thought I was going to get bent over there, literally. And so, I don't know what to do other than just, Bill and I talked about that. We go to prison, man. I'm not going to just take it. I'm going to at least try and fight my way out of something. But you get there and the reality of it, man, if 3 or 4 guys want to hold you down, they're going to do what they want. But this place, wasn't that level of security. It wasn't a medium or maximum type of penitentiary. It was a camp, federal camp. You could walk out of there if you wanted to. And then, of course, yeah, you're going to get charged with escape and go back to behind the fence somewhere behind a different location. But there were some hardcore guys there that were there for a long time. They'd been locked up 20 plus years and they were on their way out. They'd worked themselves down to a camp system to where, they're 2 or 3 years away from being home. That's the goal for most of those guys there, but you're still going to have fights. You're still going to have guys, challenge you. When I got there and they found out I was a policeman, it had been a couple of weeks and, I ran across a guy I had arrested. And then from there, it was like a grass fire. He lit that up and everybody knew I was a policeman within 2 minutes. Those next 2 weeks, not very many people talked to me. I slept in a cubicle with about 16 guys and on a bunk bed where I was on top. My bunkie on the bottom looked like a dude that, who could play, for the Steelers, lineman. He was big and what you would think of prison, big black guy, looked like he was from the Green Mile. Turned out to be a very cool guy that, we hit it off. We were friends in there and, he didn't care what I was. His opinion was, hey, you didn't put me here. A guy like Brandon McFadden or another guy that testified against me put me in here. The majority of the people there were informants, snitches. They had worked themselves down by telling on people to get to a camp. And so when it was found out that I was a policeman who had gone to trial, it actually gave me a little more credibility, if you will, that, look, this guy's either stupid and went to trial facing a life sentence if he had been convicted of everything, or maybe he really wasn't guilty and he went up there to tell it like it was. And, there's a reason why he was only convicted of a few crimes versus 60. And that really helped me. Those guys who hated me eventually started to come around. I became kind of the jailhouse lawyer. They had stupid questions. These are not the brightest.
You got to tell us some stupid questions. I want to hear some stupid questions.
Hey Jay, that was my nickname in there, JZ, because on my Jay Henderson on my name tag. And these guys are from 18 to 80. That's what's in this prison. And they would take bets and on money. Hey, Jay, can a policeman shoot a guy if one guy's got a gun and the policeman's got the bad guy's got a knife? Can you shoot him? Yeah, you can. These guys would almost get in fights. See, I told you. And the other guy, like, you can't shoot somebody with a knife. So these weren't the smartest cats in the world, but some of them were pretty decent guys. They just made mistakes, and it ranged from drug trafficking to there were other policemen there, corruption, and
hey Jeff, you actually met a guy from Tulsa there, right? I mean, that but besides the guy you arrested and put in there was a guy that kind of took you under his wing, so to speak.
Yeah, he was actually from Tulsa. That's all I'll say, and good guy. He did show me around. You got to know the language there. It's a whole lot different than the street. Money, how to buy things, how to get things.
What is the money in prison? You can't. It's not like everybody's walking around with $20.
You got like a debit card, a corporate American Express Platinum. What are we talking about?
Venmo. You Venmo in prison.
Well, Cash App's another big one.
Cash App is
Cash App. Coinbase. You guys doing crypto? What are you doing there?
Yeah, Bitcoin. So no, cell phones are obviously not allowed, but they're there. People are, they're there. But money was kind of converted into stamps. Mail your mama a letter, you put a stamp on it. Well, that stamp's worth some money in there, and you can only buy 2 books of stamps at a time. That's all you're technically allowed at the time I was there to possess are 2 books of stamps. Well, a book of stamps at that time, I think, was around $8.80 or $6.80, something like that. Well, to bet on a football game or to pay somebody for some shoes you might want, they're leaving, they're going home, but you want those Nikes because these boots are uncomfortable. There's not a lot of guys my size, so I had to wait on the little guy leaving.
Yeah, he's waiting. Were there kids locked up there with you, man? You're waiting for the size 3T t-shirts to be left behind?
Sears Roebuck Husky.
So there weren't any poles in there either. So so
this is called athletic.
You had to pay these guys, and it was all about stamps, and you had to buy them and hide them. So, the cops would search your lockers. If you had more than 2 books, you get hit, they take them. And the way you pay a guy, if you owe him 10 books of stamps, he mails them home to his mama, grandma, wife, if they have them, or spouse. And they go to the the post office, and they get them refunded to a certain amount, and they convert that into cash. And so that's what became real money. You had guys in there, they're playing dominoes, cards, betting on ball games, hundreds of dollars at a time. And you don't pay up, somebody's getting hurt. So
all paid in stamps, forever stamps, huh? Well, I'm curious, how much does a pair of Nikes cost with stamps?
You're looking at $20, man. And these aren't some Air Jordans. These are some shit.
These some hoopsies.
They're not boots, but at least you can go, run in them. They got, work. Everybody's working out. You got, where I was at, we had real weights, free weights, which a lot of prisons don't because people have had their head crushed in with them. So this place still allowed it. We worked out twice a day. That's all, I hate to say it because Sean and I have seen those dudes on the street, man. That's all they do.
Yeah, you can always tell a guy, you can tell a guy right out of prison or within 6 months. I mean, you'll run into somebody, and whether you've dealt with them before, if it's someone you've dealt with before, because listen, the street gangsters don't go to the gym.
No.
And so when you run into them, yeah, you run into them on a car stop and someone gets out and they're all swolled up. You're like, man, when did you get out? It's literally, it's like the first thing you say, man, how long you been out? 3 months. And then you ask them, you chop it up and you try to have a conversation, man, how much were you benching in there? And they tell you some astronomical number,
800,
and literally they'll tell you,
times.
they'll tell you something absurd, but you can always tell when somebody's been in the street term, the zoo, for penitentiary, when they've been in and locked out and they get out. And then you look at them again about 9 months later, and then they're, little guys like me. So, man, Jeff, I know that was a shitty deal for you. But you've been home for a while now. You had a little bit of probation when you came home, and family's still there for you, still with your lovely wife, and your kids are growing up, and man, life's okay for you right now.
It is. Yeah, it's a lot better, obviously, but that's a big factor. I don't know how a guy would do it without a family or somebody, at least, writing letters to inmates. I know, coming from an ex-police officer, my attitude back in the day would be, who gives a fuck? That guy's a bad guy or a piece of shit. But there's a lot of people in there that really aren't. Same with North Tulsa. North Tulsa not full of bad people. It's like every section of this city. There's knuckleheads everywhere. That's just where I happen to work. Sean and I, we focused up there and we were successful. But yeah, life is back to normality. I mean, I hate every day. I lost my career that I loved. I don't brag, but I think I was pretty good at it. I worked around guys that we were all very good at it, and it was fun going to work. It's different, but I've been blessed with a good job, and my family, loyalty, all that's there. And, it could have been worse.
Yeah. And before we pop out of here, because the show's, we're about out of time, but without a doubt, I mean, Jeff's been a good friend of mine. We've been through a lot of shit, at work type of deal, seeing his kids grow up and vice versa. And definitely Jeff missed the hell out of working with you in the latter part of our careers. But let me ask you this before we finish this thing, man. Even though it ended the way that it did, you still love being a cop and would have done it again?
Wouldn't have changed anything I did in my career. I didn't do anything wrong. And I would tell anybody that they really had time to sit down and dissect what we know and what we saw. I wouldn't change it. We were very good. And as a whole, this country, I know it's gotten a lot of flack right now from, your trash talk in the newspapers and people that don't understand the job and never will. As a whole, this country's got the best policemen and law enforcement that in the world. Nobody's going to beat that. And if you don't like it, what we told people back in the day, leave. Get the fuck out. Go somewhere else if you don't like, the United States or Tulsa. And we told them, man, go to another state. There's 49 of them, so get out of here. But I miss what I did.
I wouldn't recommend South Dakota, though.
Yeah, there's
No offense to our South Dakota listeners. I apologize, but I
There's
went up
only
there
like
this summer
30
and
people
froze
there,
my
minus
eyes
the
off.
I was to say, do they have a podcast up there? Does Apple or Spotify touch that area? But listen, man, we appreciate you being on here. And just to kind of finalize what you said there, the system is not perfect. But I agree, it's still probably the best one that's out there in the world. So it's got its flaws, always will. It's part of human nature. But
cheers
Jeff,
to you, sir.
Jeff to yours,
Thanks
my
for
man.
being on. We appreciate it.
Love you, brother. Be careful.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Bye.